Hi, and welcome to the Skincarma Pod. I'm Carmine, the creator and voice of the Skincarma blog. With more than 25 years in beauty as a brand builder, copywriter, and skincare junkie, I'm putting my product wisdom and expertise to work demystifying skincare. Today, we're exploring one of the most talked about and least understood molecules in longevity science, NAD+. If you spend any time on social media, you've probably heard people talking about boosting their NAD through supplements, IV drips, and a growing number of longevity protocols. But here's the question that almost no one is asking. How do you know if your NAD levels actually need to be boosted in the first place? Because until recently, measuring NAD in the human body, especially in blood, has been incredibly difficult. The molecule is unstable, it degrades quickly, and for decades, reliable testing was largely confined to research labs. Which means that much of the conversation around NAD has been built on assumptions, perceptions, not measurement or anything tangible. My guest today is working to change that. Yadi Neri is the CEO of NAD Med, a Finnish health technology company developing one of the first clinical blood tests designed to measure NAD levels accurately and at scale. In this conversation, we're going to explore what NAD actually does in the body, why it's so hard to measure, and what it means for the first time to be able to quantify something that's become central to the longevity conversation. And perhaps most importantly, whether we should be testing before we start trying to boost. So let's do it. Let's welcome Yadi to the pod. Yadi, hello.
Hello, Carmen. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Welcome to the Skin Karma pod.
Thank you.
I have been anticipating this conversation for quite a while. I know we talked a few weeks ago, and I'm like, what? I cannot wait to have this conversation with you. I'm so fascinated, and of course, from what you're doing, that this is a really buzzy, thing out in the wellness market, the beauty market. Like it's NAD is being talked about everywhere. But Yari, before we get into the science, I'd love to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, where you are?
Okay, I'm located in Helsinki, Finland, and the reason why the something NAD related is here that at the University of Helsinki there is a very uh, in-depth mitochondria disease research, and that's where the company started from.
Mm,
However, I'm not a researcher by background. My education is I'm actually an engineer, but I
mm,
work on the business side of things in all kinds of medical related fields, MRI scanners, hospital operations, and so on and so forth. And for the past 5 years, I've been now working with NotMed, which is the company that measures NADs. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at the moment.
mm. I that it, so you clarified something where I was going to ask you if it was NAD Med or NAD Med. I'm assuming you're expecting consumers to pronounce it both ways.
Yeah, we'll see all versions, and that's fine by us.
Yeah. Okay, great. So listeners sometimes assume that the CEO of a biotech company is the lead scientist, but that's not always the case. What exactly is your role at NADMed, and how do you work with the scientific team behind the technologies?
Well, there are four founders. The
Okay.
other three are PhDs,
Mm,
professors in the relative fields, so they cover the science section. And my job really is to make sure that everybody in the team, which is now larger than that, have what they need to do their work. So that's what I'm primarily responsible for. And then, of course, I represent the company in different occasions. And I guess I'm now, after half a decade, I'm getting to a point that I'm quite comfortable in having not scientific but medical discussions about the topic.
got it. So you mentioned that NADMed actually grew out of mitochondrial research at the
Yes.
University of Helsinki. How did that research environment ultimately lead to the formulation or the formation of NADMET?
Well, that's actually quite simple. So when you study mitochondria, you
Hmm.
end up with the need to measure NADs day in, day out. And that
Hmm.
used to be so complicated and partially impossible that the team, and actually, to be precise, one of our founders, our CSO, Chief Scientific Officer right now, then just got frustrated and thought that there must be a better way to do this. Because up until that point, mass spectrometry was the only way to reliably measure certain forms of NADs. And that is expensive, slow, and not very accessible. So she worked a few years on basic research and came up with a method that is a lot lighter, equally accurate as the mass spec, which used to be the gold standard for NAD measurement. And now we have technology that any clinical laboratory can use to measure all forms of NADs accurately, quickly, and in high volumes, which is a novelty.
And what's the reason specifically that NAD is so difficult to measure until now?
Well, NAD resides inside of cells. And then, if you think about the most accessible biological sample type, which is blood, then in the red blood cells in particular. And in red blood cells, you have hemoglobin and all kinds of other things that
Mm.
make it complicated to get relevant signals. And then the NADs are deep inside the cells, wrapped in multiple layers of different proteins, and getting them out from their hiding places is not trivial. And then once you get them out, they are very unstable, so difficult things to work with. So you need not only need to tease them out first, and then you need to stabilize them very quickly, and then from there on, it is then once you get to that point, then measuring is not that complicated anymore. But there are some intricacies in that as well.
It sounds like the body's done a really good job of protecting NAD.
Yeah, you could say that. And what's
Yeah.
interesting is that the NAD, the biology of NAD, is on a high level identical in humans, in all animals, in plants, or any cellular life. So they do pretty much the same basic thing in
Across
all
all
life
life
forms.
forms.
Yeah. So without
Right.
NADs, you would not have life on this planet as we know it. So they're kind of central to our health.
Fascinating. And I had a conversation in the last episode of the podcast about SOD. And
Okay.
it kind of like sparked something in me. It seems like the same kind of thing is going on. But before we get deeper into the science, can you I know you're not a scientist, but you're certainly versed in what NAD is. Can you just basically share at a high level what NAD is and what it does in the body?
Right. Yeah. The I guess the biggest function for NAD is to serve fuel for mitochondria to make ATP, which is the energy form of energy that cells can use. So essentially, the transformation from the food we eat, which is energy, into the form of energy that cells can use requires NADs as a fuel to energize that process. And it's a fairly long chain of events, but NADs are necessary in that. So without NADs, cells don't have energy, and that, of course, means that that's not a good thing. Other than that, NADs serve they regulate some 300 different metabolic processes. So they are kind of the signaling molecules between cells on how different metabolic processes should run and where the body directs resources. And then also, NAD is required for DNA repair. And there's a lot of that
Uh,
going on, and that's where we get closer to the skin. Actually, that's where lots of the DNA repair takes place because of the sunlight and so on and so forth. And that process is a very high consumer of NADs. which then can lead to deficiencies locally or globally in our bodies of NADs. And then we come into the question of that, how do we fix that deficiency and so on and so forth. And that's where the supplements and others come in.
Right. And, it's so fascinating to me because there's so many people doing all kinds of crazy things to boost their own NAD levels when they don't even know that their NAD levels need to be boosted.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the perplexity in all of this to me. And I was talking to an integrative medical doctor several months ago, and there's this whole wave of NAD supplements, topical supplements, in skincare, and then oral supplements, and we were talking about whether you even need to be boosting your NAD, whether you can test it or not, and what happens to the body when you actually boost your NAD, because the body produces its own NAD.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess similar to like the that how it produces its own collagen, and collagen declines as you age, and NAD declines as you age. But is this decline in NAD really one of the drivers of our own loss of energy and the loss of energy in our cells? Is it really that simple?
Well, nothing about this is simple. So
Oh,
that's
there you
to
go.
everything. And I think the jury is still out on the topic of do NADs decline as we age?
Ah, okay.
What we have seen is that your blood NAD levels do not decline because of aging. They,
Hmm.
on the population level, older population tend to have lower NAD levels in their blood, but that's because of the fact that as you get older, you contract more chronic and acute illnesses and diseases, and those consume NAD. So that explains the one part of the NAD perceived NAD decline as we age. So the healthier, if you're healthy, aging does not necessarily affect your NAD levels. And now I'm talking about blood. And then a different story is that each organ and each tissue type may behave differently. And that's why I say that the jury is still out, because this is fairly young part of science, and there's been precious little research in this space yet. There's a lot going on all the time, and the volume is increasing, so that's good news. So we'll learn more all the time, but still we do not know with any certainty what the mechanisms are in different parts of the body.
Fascinating. Have you tested your own NAD levels?
Yes, I have an opportunity to do that frequently, so I actually do.
And
Yeah. Well, I'm in the category of person with the chronic disease, that being diabetes type 1, and
ah,
this would be expected. My NAD levels were at the lower end of the what we have established as the healthy range.
mm-hmm.
So then I have taken action, vitamin B3 supplementation that fixes the problem, or if it is a problem, but certainly I'd rather be somewhere in the middle rather than on the lower
Of
end.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just had blood work done earlier in the week, and when you get blood work done, they test like 1,000 things,
Mm-hmm.
and every hour I'm getting an alert on my phone saying there's a new test result, and I was on my morning ride this morning, and these alerts were coming through, and I'm like, I wanted to pull over, but I waited until I was done riding,
Okay.
and I'm like feverishly like checking. Oh my god, my testosterone levels are okay. They're not great, they're not they're not horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fascinating. We're all so obsessed with what's going on in our body and trying to link what's going on in our body to other things.
Yeah.
So you said that you were supplementing vitamin B3. It's that simple.
It's one way to do it.
Hmm.
So NAD is a derivative of vitamin B3. So you
And
can
that's
say
not
that
niacinamide.
it's niacin acid is the more effective one, but any
Got it.
vitamin B3 gets converted into NMN and R, and the thing goes on, and finally, then in the cell, it's synthesized to NAD.
Mm,
To say that NAD is the bodily form of vitamin B3. And that's one way to look at it, that it is a vitamin deficiency if there is a deficiency, and then you probably would do as you would do with any other vitamin deficiency that you get to take supplements to correct that.
right.
And whether it makes sense to do that blindly or not, I have
Right.
an opinion on that, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And so how does the test work? You know, before we get into where the test is available, and I understand that it's not fully available yet, but how does the test itself actually work?
What we do is that you need to have a venous blood draw. So meaning that
Okay.
it's not a finger prick and it's not a dry blood spot. The reason for that is that these NADs, like I suggested already, that they are rather complicated or nasty things to keep track of because they are so unstable, and they don't like to be dried. They don't like to be heated. They get cleaved and converted to other molecules very quickly unless the sample is treated properly.
Mm,
So you need to have a ordinary blood draw. Not very much blood is needed. I mean, it's a tiny sample, 120 microliters, so that'll do, and which is about half a dozen to 10 drops is
mm,
the volume that is needed. And then the measurement needs to be done in the laboratory because of the extraction that I briefly described, that is critical. And then the stabilization of the molecules and then the measurement. So there's no home test. We don't believe in home collection at this point because the samples typically do not survive that process, or there's
yeah.
too much risk that they get too warm and more stay too long in the transportation chain and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So it needs to be kind of a medical grade sample collection, and from there on it's you know any clinical laboratory with a very reasonable amount of training and validation can run our assay to measure the NAD levels reliably and accurately. So it's fairly standard type of a blood test, with the exception of the sample handling that needs to be more precise than for most other blood tests.
So would you say that the way the blood is handled, like in what I had done on Monday, coincidentally, when I had a venous blood draw, as you said, and they removed like 6 vials of blood and they sent it off to the lab. Is that sufficient? And then the lab, or is there something else going on in between there that doesn't allow NAD to be tested?
That sounds like that would be sufficient because in
Got it.
all likelihood the samples were cooled, so they're not shipped in an envelope that may get frozen over.
Right.
So
Right. I drop it
yeah,
into FedEx
yeah, yeah,
myself, kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah. So that sounds like that those samples would be good for measurement.
And so the testing protocol you've developed, the tests you've developed, is
Mhm.
rolling out now. Is it possible for me to get my NAD tested?
Yes, and in the fairly short order, more so than before. Now we're just
Mm,
opening up a couple of partner laboratories in North America that then will service their customer base, which are clinicians and clinics, and that would be then the source for a ordinary person to get the NAD test, is to talk to the clinics that work with these particular laboratories, and they both serve the whole country, so it should be
right.
really accessible.
So I would need to presumably go online and search for a clinic that is actually engaging in this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
not necessarily through my own doctor. Like if I had asked her on Monday when she said, "What do we want to test?" and I said, "Test my NAD,"
mhm.
she would have probably been like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, most likely she would have had a question that how do I do that? But
Right.
now I think come May, then you should be able to uh, find places to get your NAD testing
In a couple of weeks.
in a couple of yeah I
Yeah. I mean, we're recording the middle of April. Yeah.
yeah
That'd be awesome. I need to do it. I need to do it. And as you know, I'm moving to LA in 2 weeks. So maybe when I get to LA.
yeah.
Yadi, at the same time the science is evolving, NAD's become a huge topic in wellness, like supplements. I know people who are getting IV drips with NAD plus in the drip.
Hmm.
When you look at that conversation from the scientific side and your point of view, what do you think people misunderstand most about NAD?
Well, it's not a miracle cure. That's one thing. It is, like I said, necessary for all life forms, and you need to have enough of it. And but if you're generally healthy, you eat sensibly, do a little bit of exercise, then the chances are that your NAD levels are okay.
Right.
Um, but then, if you have any complications, be they chronic or acute diseases, inflammations, any kind of a disturbance on the body, then most of those things do consume NAD, and then you may end up in a situation that you may need more. And of course, before you get into the situation, it would be good if your NAD levels are where they should be. There's no known benefit, or let me say, no benefit that I know of maximizing your NAD levels. I mean, they will
Mm,
go with supplementation to levels that are maybe 3, 4, 5 times the normal range, but I'm not aware of any particular benefit of doing that.
right.
There's some people think that there may be actually harmful effects of doing that, but very little evidence of that either. So,
That the conversation I mentioned with the integrative medical doctor revolved around the idea that boosting your own NAD levels outside of that range, like like you mentioned, maybe 3 times more NAD than you need, your body over time, over a matter of weeks and months, stops producing its own NAD because it doesn't think it needs NAD. And then when you stop supplementing, what happens then? Then your NAD levels plummet and your energy level plummets, and your body has to course correct for that.
mhm.
And this is a process that takes weeks, months even. So it is just it's all evolving. It's just fascinating, and of course the consumer behavior and the consumer expectation is ahead of the science as usual. But it's such a fascinating realm, which is why I wanted to have you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Um,
Pleasure. Yeah.
yeah, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share about what you're up to?
Well, when you're talking about NADs, you typically think about NAD plus, which is the, if you will, the basic form, and
Mm,
that comes coupled with the reduced form NADH, which means that there's one electron that has been transported one place, and they kind of revolve from one form to another. Um, and when you talk about measuring for diagnostic or therapy follow up purposes or just health check, then it makes sense to measure both forms because the ratio of these two forms is, as one professor put it, is the language that the cells understand when they are directing the resources to catabolic or metabolic uses. So that's one thing that I think will gain in importance. And the why it has not been really flagged that often is that the measuring NADH part has been particularly difficult.
mm,
And now that is something that our customer laboratories can do. And it doesn't stop there. Then there's the phosphorylized forms, NADP and NADPH, again a pair that serve other purposes, and they then feed into the antioxidant world where glutathione come in, and those also can be measured with our technology. So the fact that all these six metabolites that I now mentioned can be measured in high volumes is something that will, in the years to come, reveal new or open up new vistas into what's happening in our bodies. And what we think is going to be interesting and important is to establish we call the metabolic profile or the cellular metabolic profile or fingerprint of each person, which seems to correlate already with the limited data that we have. There are strong indications that that profile is actually very distinct between people with different diagnoses, and that reaches into oncology and neurology and areas like that. So that is an extremely interesting new space that is opening up. And I think that will be more in the medical diagnostics and then therapy follow-up applications where that comes in. But like you said, it is a fascinating field, very complicated, and we're just getting into it. So there's
Yeah.
a lot more to come in the NAD science.
Super interesting. Yadi, let's move on to the lightning round. These are kind of fun questions, not that we haven't been having fun. Something you believed early in your career that you no longer believe.
Oh boy. Well, maybe miracle cures. I, as a younger person, I thought that there may be some, well, if not silver bullets, then something close to it. But now realizing that, especially in the medical sciences, everything is related to everything else, and everything is complicated, and and it is really the balance that counts, and a lot of things need to be right. And if you change something, then everything else will be affected. So that is. I'm not sure if that's a comforting thought, but certainly helps you to realize that human body is very, very complicated and intricate mechanism.
The last place you traveled that really inspired you.
The last place I traveled, I think I went to Mexico City for the first time in
Oh, amazing,
October, and
right?
I was really
Yeah.
impressed by, I mean, the sheer size, of course, but then the diversity in arts,
Mm.
the food, the whole environment. I found that very, very fascinating.
Yeah. The last time I was in Mexico City, I took a hot air balloon ride over the city and over the pyramids just north
Ah,
of the city. It was
yeah,
incredible, like pyramids.
yeah, yeah. I took the
Yeah.
land route to the pyramids, and that was very impressive as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really cool. One thing that keeps you grounded.
Well, I could say my wife, but probably not what you're looking for. But I think it is the little things in life that turn out to be the important things anyway. So you can be high flying with all kinds of uh, complicated things, but then what really make the difference is the everyday little things.
Nice. Last question. If you could give people one piece of advice when it comes to taking care of their health long term, what would it be?
One piece of advice: exercise, eat sensibly. I mean, moderation is good enough, and sleep well.
Ah, that's the perfect place to end, and I couldn't agree more on that last point. Good, solid, regular sleep is so key. Oh, Yadi, this is incredible. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and good luck in getting this rolled out. We all need this.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thanks. Ciao.
Bye now.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Skin Karma Pod. Find more insights, real talk, and reviews of my favorite skincare products on the Skin Karma blog skincarma.com. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review this episode. It helps me to reach more listeners. Ciao.